Welcome back to DIY Crafts and Hacks. Today I am here making masks for my family and friends to help protect them. So either when somebody is ill, to protect the rest of the family, or when my family needs to go out and get supplies from the grocery store, etc. I would like them to be protected. So we're going to make some masks here. These are not N95 masks. However, the Center for Disease Control has updated its advice and suggests homemade masks may be used when other manufactured masks are not available. These are fastest made by sewing machine. However, if you do not have a sewing machine, you may make them by hand sewing. There's not a lot of hand sewing. It'll just take a little bit longer. In this video, I'm assuming you have basic sewing skills, so I'm really just focused on making the masks. For the best fit, I would recommend you make one of these, have your family members try them on, and that way you can make any adjustments you need to get the best fit. These masks and the size used in this video has fit various adult members of my family, but if you have some younger teenagers or children, you will need to probably adjust these masks and make them smaller. Before we jump into the directions and supplies needed, please click that red subscribe button below and turn on that bell icon so you don't miss any of our future videos. Let's talk quickly about the supplies you'll need. First, you'll need some cotton fabrics. I'm a sewer. I have lots of fabrics. I also quilt, so I've got lots of these fat quarters. You can make it fun by letting your family members pick their favorite fabric. I've also decided to use a white cotton. These are all cottons. I've decided that I want to line them with white, but you could use the same fabric on the front and the back. You can see the white here, but you could use the same one. It's fine. You'll need some thread, and you'll need a sewing machine or some hand sewing needles. If you're going to sew by hand, you'll need a ruler, and I'm actually going to use both of these. It's just helpful. This little one is helpful when you're working with the pleats. You'll need some scissors, or if you're a sewer and you happen to have a rotary cutter, that makes cutting several of these very fast. You'll need some pins, twist ties. Okay, these come on either fruits and vegetables. When you buy them in the grocery and you put your fruit and vegetables in a bag, you use one of these twist ties to keep it closed. Or they also come in some of these the basically Ziploc bags, so these old-fashioned kind of fruit and bread storage bags, and some old garbage bags had these twist ties. So what we're going to use those for is the nose, so the nose area at the top of the mask. This is going to provide a tighter fit around the face by including that. We're also going to use elastic, so ideally, I think 1/8 of an inch. You can also use 1/4 of an inch. I've actually taken some wider elastic and I'm cutting it in half. If you can see, there's actually some lines on this elastic that actually help guide cutting it down the middle. We'll need 2 7-inch pieces, so it's not a lot of elastic. One version of the mask uses double bias tape on the edges to cover the raw edges. If you don't have that, you could also make this other variation instead, which does not use the bias tape. And you need an iron and an ironing board. 2 quick things. If you don't have these zip ties, don't worry about it, just leave that step out. And if you don't have a supply of fabric, but you do know how to sew, well, you could also just use some old clothing, cotton clothing with a tight weave. That would work fine. So after you've decided which mask you're going to make, the first step is cutting out the fabric. So if you are making the mask with the bias tape on the sides, here are our measurements. You are going to cut 2 pieces of fabric, 7.5 inches wide by 8 inches tall. So here are my 2 pieces of fabric. And you are going to put them right sides together and just pin across the top to hold them together, so when you walk over to your sewing machine, they don't slip. If you're making the mask that does not have the bias tape, you are going to cut 2 pieces of fabric 8.5 inches wide by 8 inches tall. Okay, so I've cut my fabric here, and again, I am going to pin them. We are going to go over to the sewing machine and we are going to sew a 1/4 inch seam across the top. Okay, and that is for either mask. All right, we've sewn our 1/4 inch seam. The next step is for the mask with the bias tape. I'm going to iron this and press my seam. And then the next step will be to insert the twist tie up into the seam. Just set it up there right along. Side the seam as close as you can get it. And we'll take this over to the sewing machine and we are going to stitch down and around this twist tie just to secure it in place. The main difference between these two masks is several of the steps with the mask on the left with the bias tape. We are going to be working with the fabric with the wrong sides together. So because our finishing is going to be on the seams on the side, I can work with wrong sides together and see the right side of the fabric. With the mask on the right, we are going to be doing the initial steps with the fabric sides together. So in essence, at the end, we are going to turn this to the right side after we've done a bunch of stitching. The twist tie on this one will be inserted later. You can now see I've sewn across the top where the twist tie is located. The next step is I am going to sew all the way across the top a 1/4 inch seam. And that's going to just make this seam across the top of the mask that we can see here. I then am going to turn this right sides together, and I'm going to sew the bottom seam a 1/4 inch. So again, just to review, with wrong sides together, I am going to sew a 1/4 inch across the top. That's going to be this finished seam up here. I then am going to flip it right sides together and sew a 1/4 inch seam on the bottom. I've done my sewing and I'm now going to turn this to the right side. So you can see the seam across the top, and I now basically have a tube. I'm now going to go press this so that my bottom seam is nice, and then I will sew the finished stitch a 1/4 inch from the bottom as seen in this mask. Okay, our mask with the bias tape, we have now sewn the 1/4 inch seam across the top. We've sewn the 1/4 inch seam across the bottom. Again, this is now wrong sides together. We're going to set this one aside because this one is ready to make the pleats, and we're going to go to the mask that does not have the bias tape, and we're going to get this one caught up to the same step. So just to quickly review, for this mask, all we've done so far is we have our two pieces of fabric right sides together. We've sewn our 1/4 inch seam across the top. Now for this mask, what we are going to, in essence, do is we are going to be sewing the two seams down the side. We're going to leave a space open at the bottom to flip this. Let me move this so you can see it a little better. Again, we're going to sew down the sides. We will be inserting the elastic, the 7-inch piece of elastic, as we go. So this piece is going to get inserted in our seam as we're sewing. It's going to be inserted up here. I'm going to start there, and I'm going to tack it down. Then I will stretch this elastic, making sure it's not twisted, down to the bottom corner, so that as I sew this seam down, when I get to the corner, I can secure this elastic in the seam. I will then sew across the bottom to about here, leaving this open, and then I will start sewing, and I will do the same thing on the other side. I will insert the elastic, stitch this down, and then I will put the other end in the seam and capture it up here so that I will have the two pieces inside this sewn piece of these sewn pieces of fabric. If it's easier for you, another option is to secure the two top pieces and then sew the seam down, secure the end pieces, and stitch across to about here. Okay, so we'll do that. Once that's all sewn, we will flip it and iron it, and then we'll be ready for pleating. Okay, I've now sewn this. I'm flipping it. I did make sure as I was sewing the sides, I did kind of feel with my finger to make sure that I wasn't sewing on top of the elastic as I was going down the sides, and I was only catching it in the corners. Here you can see it is starting to look like the mask here. So now we have basically our unpleated mask. We have the ear ties. I'm going to iron this, and then on this mask I am going to take the twist tie and I will insert it up to the top. Again, I will press it up against the seam, and then I will stitch around it. So I have the nose piece. Again, if you don't have a twist tie, don't worry, just skip this step. Okay, we have now sewn the twist tie. We've ironed it. I've even ironed under a small piece here later for my finished seam when I get to it. But the big thing now is to make the pleats. So I am going to fold down about 2 1/4 inches. And then I am going to put my fingers here and to just make a small pleat and turn this up so that I have basically the same amount on the left side and the right side. You can see about how much I've pinched. I am going to insert a pin on either side to secure this. And then I'm going to continue to make 2 more pleats, folding down. I don't know about how much that is. Let's see. Maybe 1.5 inches roughly. We'll see how that works. Again, fold it back. On the side, I'm going to try to make sure I don't overlap this too much because it will be a little bit hard to sew if I get too many layers there. So you may need to adjust your pleats so that they don't overlap. And then I'll fold it down one more time and make one last pleat. Let me pin that, and then I'm going to check roughly my size. I'm hoping to have about 1 inch at the bottom, maybe a little bit more. And I'm hoping this overall side seam is approximately 4 inches. Again, none of this needs to be exact, but yes, it's about 4 inches. A little bit more on this side, so my pleats might not be as tight. We could adjust that if we want. I could move this one down. And then repin this so they don't overlap. Okay, and that's probably a little bit accurate. That looks good to me. I'm going to do the same pleating with the other mask. And when I'm done, for the mask with the bias tape, I will go over and just stitch down the side about a 1/4 inch seam just to secure the pleats. On this mask, I'm actually going to stitch all the way around. So I secure the pleats, I capture this bottom edge and secure that. And I'm going to do that twice, and then this mask will be done. So again, I'm going to sew around twice, a 1/4 inch seam, just to secure everything. Taking out the pins as I sew. I don't like to sew over pins on this one. Let's see, we'll do the pleats. And I'll continue as I did with the other one. Just eyeballing these pleats and inserting pins. I've now sewn all around the edge of my mask twice. This is the mask that was like the blue mask that did not have the bias tape. So this mask is actually finished now. Again, I can bend this at the nose and put this on. If the mask is a little loose because the elastic is too big, you can simply tie a little knot on the side like I did on this one. And then you could certainly adjust your elastic length going forward. These are ready to be washed now, and I'll put one in a plastic bag in my purse so that when I go to the grocery store during this coronavirus outbreak, I have some protection. Now to finish the mask with the bias tape, I have stitched down my pleats, as you can see here. I have cut 2 pieces of the bias tape so that they are slightly longer. I am going to take my elastic and I am going to secure it here and here on each side at the top and the bottom. And then I will basically take the the bias tape, and I will fold it around the edge. I will pull this up and I will stitch down. If you wish, you could turn under a slight bit of the bias tape if you don't want to see the raw edge, and do it this way. And then once you've stitched that down on either side, you are finished. So again, I hope you enjoyed this DIY craft and found it helpful. Please like and share this video if you did, and leave us a comment below. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. And if you really enjoyed making these, look online. There's sites now that are asking for sewers to make masks and mail them in because of the short supply. So thanks, stay healthy, and see you next time.